listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams.
Good morning, and welcome to the Political Hour. I'm Mhariel Summers, and boy, I am happy to be back. You know, each week I'm hoping for a smooth week. That's like hoping for it to be cold in Miami right now. It is hotter than it's been in Florida in a long time, but there's so much calamity in the world too at the same time. And, I want to talk about some of it. It's a lot happening at the national level, the state level, the local level, and I want to try and touch some of that. But the main topic for today is going to be political identity. I want to talk to y'all about how you can better shape your own political identity. Identity's everywhere, right? How you identify with your race, your ethnicity, your sex or your sexual orientation, your nation, your birthplace. We identify in all of these ways, and I want to stress to you today that your political identity is very important. How you identify politically. It says how you see society. It says what you think ought to happen or ought to be, what should happen in different situations. And it really puts your axis for right and wrong into perspective as we face society. It's your compass as we encounter these new issues. Because again, politics is all encompassing. It's in everything we do. It's in everything we touch, and everything we eat. Politics is everywhere. And so what is your political identity? It's important to understand. It's also important to understand the political identity of others, right? So that you know which party to be in. You know which candidates to support. You know which policies to oppose. And so that you know what's at the heart of these issues when these two sides are arguing. It can all seem so far reaching and ambiguous sometimes, but the more rooted you are in your political identity, the better you're going to be able to assess what's happening in our society day by day, right? So me personally, I identify as a moderate liberal who's progressive thinking with a conservative base position, right? What does that mean? Well, that's what I'm hoping to kind of dive through. I want to explain a few different dimensions of what political identity is all about. Oftentimes you hear your left versus your right? Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? But there are other dimensions to examine. Are you a moderate or a progressive? Are you a liberal or a conservative? Are you a centrist? Are you far-leaning? Or are you staunch in your position? And as I talk about it, you'll notice that these terms, they overlap, they interchange. Your political identity is unique, and it's far more than Democrat or Republican. The way that issues play out in our society, whether it's policy or the way ideology is spread and what's popular, what is the topic of the hour, it's so complex and far more intricate than just what the Democrats or what the Republicans are doing. So identifying where you fall on the spectrum can kind of help you look at Democrats and be able to say, okay, well, this is this type of Democrat or this is this type of Republican. And that's the goal. So left to right? Your left to right often refers to the two-party system. This is when folks are talking about Democrats or Republicans. If you're a Democrat, you're on the left. If you're a Republican, you're on the right. It's like one of the most basic forms of political identity. And I don't like to use it. If you notice, when I described myself, I didn't say I was a left-leaning or right-leaning, because I feel like that oversimplifies politics. And people are quick to kind of, come to a conclusion about what you think politically if you identify very simply like I'm a left or a right. Progressive is what I said. I was a moderate liberal, progressive thinking, conservative base, right? So what is this progressive versus this moderate? Well, let me explain like this. A moderate likes to find the middle ground on how to move forward. Your moderates, everything, you hear the phrase, everything in moderation, right? So your moderates, they want to move forward, but they want to move forward cautiously. They want to preserve what's important about what is and what currently exists. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We're not changing too aggressively, but we want to change, right? We want to see change. Progressives are more forward-thinking individuals. They work for what the world could be. They aren't afraid of aggressive change and often see it as necessary. A progressive's mindset is if we fix the problem, then society will adjust in a positive way. Whereas I think the moderate says, well, let's fix the problem, but without certainty about how this is going to work out, let's take our time with how we fix it, I suppose. So it's very similar to the other category I mentioned, which is a centrist versus a far-leaning person versus a staunch person. Staunch person being hardcore, in the middle of what it is that they're doing. Like they're staunch. They are, you know what staunch means, right? I'm straight up this, I'm not extreme. I don't tend moderate. I'm straight up. But you can be far leaning and progressive, right? Or you can be a centrist with progressive views. Now I know this all sounds like, let me use an example, right? So a hot topic right now is trans women in women's sports. It's a national issue. We've had some legislation in our state this very session that passed concerning this topic. And so you can be progressive enough to be open to the dimensions of that conversation, but centrist enough not to support policy that, you know what I mean? So you it doesn't make you a Republican. You can be a Democrat who is liberal, but who has moderation, who's a moderate thinking individual who says, let's think about this. Let's think about this. Whereas you can be a progressive in the same instance and say, no, this must happen. I'll use another example on that later, but the main, most complex dimension of political identity for me is that of the liberal versus the conservative. So today, when you hear liberal versus conservative, you might think, okay, liberals are Democrats, conservatives are Republicans. But it's not like that at all. Unlike the left versus right category of defining your political identity, your liberal versus conservative, that dimension, it's a spectrum. It's not is or isn't. You can be a staunch liberal. You can be a progressive thinking liberal. You can be a moderate liberal. Same thing for conservative. And all of this is kind of so that's the I guess the spectrum that it's based on, right? This you're central, you're staunch, or you're far leaning. You're central, you're staunch, or you're far leaning. On either side, you either fall right or you fall left. You're one of these types of things, right? And liberal and conservatism is just kind of the overall blanket that covers that. So back to this example of trans women in sports. So the staunch conservative, right? Staunch conservative isn't even able to kind of see any dynamic in which this policy moves, right? The far-reaching conservative isn't going to even have the conversation, or isn't going to take it serious. The staunch conservative isn't going to have any way forward or any path, but the moderate conservative, the moderate conservative is going to say no, but open to discussing other means, right? They're going to be more willing to, so to speak, reach across the aisle to figure out how to compromise. It's still going to be a no, but it's a soft no versus like a hard no, right? Either way, on the conservative end, that's what you get there. So I've said I'm a moderate liberal, right? So let's take the same example. Moderates have this, like I said, more centrist, middle of the road view, and they want to consider all things. So as a moderate on this issue, I want to consider all of the implications and all of the ramifications of this type of policy and what kind of effect that would have. I want to recognize the human rights of others, you know, and their humanity, which is a big part of being a liberal, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I want to do that with those ramifications that I mentioned in mind. You know what I mean? I don't want to forget the importance of the effects. Whereas a progressive or far-leaning liberal, they're going to prioritize the humanity and the recognition of humanity on the premise that society will adjust. A progressive is going to push for things to change today with the idea that the means are going to lead to a just end. It's something that you see on both sides. Like I said, I use the conservative example, I use the liberal example, but that's important for you to understand as you develop your own political identity and keep vetting it over the years as things happen and issues arise. Am I a staunch liberal? Am I a moderate liberal? Because this is how you are going to better connect with the politicians. You're better going to understand the systems and the policies that they present, and we won't be such a trigger and responsive society. Democrats and Republicans debate over a host of issues. Either you are left or you are right on the issue. True. But people vary in their support for certain issues, right? Not every person who is a staunch environmentalist is a staunch gun control person. You know what I mean? Not everybody who is anti-abortion, like pro-racism. I mean, it's a spectrum. So when you're looking at this, traditionally, okay, so liberals traditionally support issues like equality, justice, racism, helping the poor, public education, public systems and support for people, healthcare for all, human rights, like I said, the environment, gun control. All of these issues normally come from liberal thinking individuals, whereas conservative thinking individuals are more focused on topics like the economy and taxes, traditionalism in a sense of like family values, anti-abortion, like I mentioned, gun rights, privatization of like industry and getting the government out of the free market, and property, you know, and the importance of property. These are conservative focused initiatives. But here's the thing, folks, we are allowed to overlap. You're not stuck agreeing to everything that one side or another has to offer. And that's why I want to talk about political identity this morning, because I don't want us, as we get more politically inclined, to get caught up on, well, I'm a Democrat, so that makes me good, and you're a Republican, so that makes you bad, right? Or that person who I thought was a decent person is a Republican, so they're a bad person. Or that person's a Democrat, so now I don't respect the way that they think. We have to be able to get more in depth with political identity. And this idea of this spectrum of liberal and conservative is a much more constructive conversation as we look to analyze and break down all the politics happening around us. Right is right and wrong is wrong, but it's all in the eye of the beholder. If you don't know how to properly compare your values in a public sphere with that of others, you'll find yourself following people who ultimately you'll be like, wait. And I'll talk about that because people are allowed to change. But yeah, again, I said I'm a moderate, liberal, progressive thinking person with a conservative base position. What does that mean, right? It means I'm more likely to vote Democrat, but at my own moderate pace because of all of my other identities, because I'm a black person, because I'm a woman, because I am a member of the LGBT community. I have to be forward thinking because we live in a, you guys know the society we live in. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I have to be forward thinking. I don't have a choice about our society, but there are many conservative positions that align with my core values and belief, right? I always say Democrats need to do more to talk about the economy and taxes and family values. I mean, these shouldn't be conservative talking points because they talk to a lot of people's core values and existences as successful people. Whereas human rights are important, we should never stop the fight there. We also have to be able to offset some of these ideas that people can easily align with on the other side, because what they're doing is tossing out triggered, if you Rep Rayner calls it red meat for their base. What they're doing is utilizing the fact that they're the only party talking about these things, framing bad legislation behind these trigger words or behind these tactics that, so to speak to these core values, and they're keeping people disenfranchised, man. They're keeping society inequitable, man. The rich are getting richer. The wages are stagnant. The job opportunities are there. They want you to go get a job, but that job cannot pay your rent. It can't take care of your family. It can't give you the lifestyle that is dangled before you every day on a social media platform. So I understand it. I understand it in terms of identifying with some of the trigger words, some of the red meat. It's easy to say, yeah, it's unfair for this or that, or women, to have to compete against trans men, and but it's or trans women. It's a complex conversation, and we have to be, in my opinion, moderate enough, no matter what side or where you are, to be able to have that conversation with somebody who doesn't see it the way that you do, so we can come to some kind of common place. But if not, if we're just triggered, if we're just low-hanging left-right fruit, they are going to keep us divided and at each other's throats as they continue to run away with America's checkbook. So, yeah, that's some good stuff there, guys. There's no room for that on a voter registration form. They don't have the capacity on the voter registration form to say, are you a moderate, liberal, progressive thinking, conservative based individual? No, they don't. They simply can say, are you a Democrat or a Republican? But it's up to you. It's up to you to evaluate where you stand so that you can have a strong political identity, so that even if you're a registered Republican, you can say, okay, well, I'm not voting for this Republican. I'm going to vote for this. As a Democrat in the primary, when it comes along, you're not saying, okay, well, I'm going to vote for this person because this person is my same skin color, or I'm going to vote for this person because she's a woman. Or I'm going to vote for this person based on all of these other identities, identity politics, right? It's a thing. It's a thing. And so your political identity will strengthen your ability to recognize what's going on. You will watch the news and political action with more conviction. You'll know who to support for all the right reasons. You'll know why people, are rising and why people are falling in this field. Do you know why people don't trust politicians? Or they dislike politicians? In my opinion, it's because they don't understand the dynamics and the complexity of politics. You vote and nothing changes. Nothing happens. So then it's easy to turn around and say, you are a bad politician, or I can't trust you, or I don't believe. It's easy to point the finger. So how do you begin to know why nothing is changing, or where to properly align your anger in yourself? You have to define your own political identity with some kind of conviction. It's a constant process, y'all. The world is changing. People are changing every day. Two years ago, we had no clue we were going to be walking around here with masks, having to get shots, and businesses shutting down, and stimulus, and we weren't even thinking like that. And here we are. And it's a political issue. Should unemployment be increased, or should people be forced to go back to work? Should masks be required? The governor was just here. I'll talk about that after I take a short break. But governor was just here in Tampa Bay, in St. Pete, announcing that all local ordinances across the state are now invalid, which means you can go anywhere without a mask. You can plan a party with as many people as you want. There are no more anything anywhere in the state of Florida because DeSantis said so. And Google it if you don't believe me. So this is what I'm saying. It's a constant process, because where do you align with that? Maybe you're one of these small business owners who's like, thank God I don't have to tell people not to wear a mask, and I don't got to worry about not planning a party too large, or this, that, and the other. Does that make you a Republican? Does that make you a supporter of the Republic? How are you able to rectify your beliefs against what is happening without being a Democrat one day and a Republican the next? Define your political identity for yourself. Look into it from all these dimensions, right? Are you left or are you right? Well, that depends. Are you more liberal or are you more conservative? What's more important? And shoot, maybe it's all important. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you're a centrist. Maybe you lean left because you're a black person or a woman or a member of the LGBT community or a poor person, or maybe you lean right. I don't know. But define it. Keep defining it. Keep vetting it. It's a constant process, but use these dimensions to keep up. And yeah, that's that. So let me see here. Where am I at on time? Oh, I'm on some good time here. I am going to take a quick break. And then when I come back, I want to talk about what is happening around the nation. A couple of those things. What's happening here in the state, and what's happening here in the city, Tampa Bay area. So this is Mhariel Summers. This is the Political Hour. Thank you for tuning. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Power Plug Radio, home of your throwback jams. listening to Power Plug Radio. Home of your throwback jams.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Political Hour. I'm Mhariel Summers, and we spent the first half of the show talking about political identity. Want to talk about some of the things that are going on around the nation, in the state, in the city, regional area, and stuff like that, with the lens of the political identity, right? So on a national level, vaccinations are in full effect. Have you been vaccinated yet? I've gotten it. I got it. I felt like it's inevitable, like the chicken pox shot, or hepatitis, or the tetanus. It's just my parents vaccinated me as a child, and so vaccinations don't really spook me. There have been a lot of worthy and very relevant objections to the vaccination. I talked to a few people, and they bring up Tuskegee, and the Johnson & Johnson recall did not help anybody's reputation for the people who are a little apprehensive about vaccinations. But I encourage you guys to get vaccinated, because outside is opening up. Things are opening up. We live in a state where our governor has said no vaccine passports or vaccine verification is going to be allowed in this state. And so to get inside a game or an event, or no city can really set up a mandate to require people to go around with proof that they're vaccinated. They look at that as a violation of one's privacy. But we'll talk about Mr. DeSantis here in a minute. On a national level, it's happening though. Vaccines are rolling out, and the economy is going to be opening. I was listening this morning about like the jobs report, and how more restaurants and bartenders and things of that nature are being hired, but at the same time, like industry and factory workers and stuff are being laid off, and other industries are still suffering, and it's causing it to kind of balance out right now, where we're not where we want to be with the jobs thing. But with outside opening up, more mass shootings are starting to pop up. That was the one thing that 2020 gave us, y'all. It was a break from these mass shootings. It was a relief to not wake up every day and hear that somebody has killed more than 3 or 4 people over a random act of violence. But here we are. The most recent, I think there was a middle school shooting yesterday. So look that up. But it's tragic, and the violence against people outside of the mass shooting arena, whether it's police violence on people, primarily African American people, if it's community violence that's occurring, in our neighborhoods and so forth, we have to do something about that. So, that's the side where I lean liberal. We have to find some solution. But the national agenda of state legislatures, it's becoming clear all across the country. In different states, Republicans are filing very similar pieces of legislation. Mind you, Republicans control a lot of the state legislatures in the South due to gerrymandering and the way that these districts are cut historically. We talked about that a few weeks ago, how during Reconstruction, how there were black representation in every state in the South, pretty much, and by 1901, all of those state legislatures had carved the districts up, and had voter suppression in place to ensure that Republicans would maintain control. Here, Republicans dominate in the state of Florida, in the Senate and in the House, and that means they're able to present whatever legislation they want, likely get the votes to pass it. The governor's a Republican. He's going to sign it, and it becomes the law. And they've been doing it all across the country. And so issues like abortion, LGBT rights, voter suppression laws, they're taking place everywhere across the country. Former President Trump is still fighting to get back on social media. I just thought that was pretty funny to kind of constantly see them make this big deal out of him not being allowed on social media with his racist views. But what's more funny to me is, it's not funny, it's really sad, but I guess I gotta laugh to keep from crying. Is that you have states like ours who are like, well, we're gonna punish big tech for silencing free speech. That's how they want to frame it, folks. Remember, I said they use these trigger words to get you on their side. Nobody wants to silence free speech, but when you peel behind it, you'll see that they're talking about not preventing racist people from spewing racist propaganda. They should be allowed to do that. That's essentially what they're talking about. So he's supposed to be starting his own social platform. We'll see how that turns out. Interesting stuff happening in a couple states. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York legalized prostitution and marijuana in the state. He was under investigation. He is under investigation for like some sexual harassment accusations, and so there is some like debate on if he is decided to let this thing down. And he says that New York's gonna be open by July. And so there is some like accusations that, man, he's in hot water, so he just had to pull out all the stops. But interesting stuff happening in the Big Apple out west. Y'all may have seen it. Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, is running for governor in California, and is a conservative, y'all. She is going to be perhaps the first trans Republican conservative candidate to ever run for anything, because she's a conservative. She came out saying no trans women should not participate in women's sports. She's a trans woman herself, and she's come out saying that. She's in support of the wall. She wants to build a wall. And so very interesting conundrum Californians find themselves in, especially the conservatives there. Do they slight with the candidate who aligns with them on so many policy issues, but identity wise seems to be on the different side of the spectrum, right? Interesting stuff happening. Let's watch it all play out. But here in the state, we have our own mini Donald Trump. His name is Ron DeSantis, our governor. And Governor DeSantis, one thing I can say about that man is he is unapologetically Republican. Hate him or love him, criticize him, call him Trump Jr. That man holds his head high, not one gray hair on his head, and he is a staunch Republican. He is willing to stand in the fire of it all, and still with a brave face support everything that he does, and does it with a smile. And I guess it's easy to do that when you're like totally, when you have all the power, when you're at such an advantage, right? It's like playing somebody in a game who's younger than you, much younger than you. You know you're gonna win. You know you have the upper hand, so it's easy to kind of do it with such conviction. But I always like to remind folks that Governor DeSantis lost or won that governor's race by less than 35,000 votes in a state of 28 million people. He won by a razor-thin margin. This state is not a Republican state. The state legislature is gerrymandered beyond belief, right? our own local representative, we share her with 3 other counties, right? So she doesn't just focus here on the Pinellas County issues, but has to be adept on Manatee and Sarasota and Hillsborough. Same with our local senator, our local state senator. Doesn't have the luxury of just being able to focus on this place, right? But has to make it a regional thing, which, you know, a lot of Republican districts aren't like that. They aren't carved up that way. And so that's why you see that heavy advantage. Hopefully, Congress can do something about this. They have some great legislation on the table. They're afraid of the filibuster, but they have some great pieces on the table. And I'm hoping that they're able to do something about this in terms of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So we'll see. We'll see on the national level. But yeah, Governor DeSantis, he's been signing bad laws. Like I said, he was here in our city a couple of days ago to tell local governments and municipalities that they no longer are able to make coronavirus ordinances, that everything they have in place is null and void, and they no longer have the power to put in mask mandates or limit crowd sizes. It's over. He's always had this resistant position and personality, very Trump-like, of our governor. He also gave Fox News an exclusive access to his signing of this voter suppression bill. Now, I can't tell you guys all of the ins and outs, but we'll keep talking about it, especially because we have elections coming up here in our city. We'll talk about the ins and outs of these new voting restrictions, but essentially, drop boxes have to be manned by a person. Remember last election, there were like 7 drop boxes. You could get your mail-in ballot, fill it out, and drop it off anywhere. It was so convenient. So convenient. You could go and pick up your neighbor's ballots for them. You had got some elderly neighbors. Our people who work in nursing homes and the shut-in type facility, rehab facilities, those people vote, man. But it was so convenient for them all to receive their ballot in the mail and have somebody from that facility drop those ballots off. Well, with this new law, you don't have to figure some other stuff out, because now it limits how many ballots you as an individual can turn in. It requires you to sign a form that says that you're authorized to turn the ballots in. It requires the person who's giving you the form or giving you the ballots to sign an attestation form saying that, yes, you can turn my ballot in. Drop boxes have to be manned by a person, like I said, and no political activity 150 feet from the drop box, right? So you think about places, the Skyway Center had a drop box last time. Gulfport Library, I believe. I know there was one at the Trop. I know there was one at the Enoch Davis Center. But when you do that, when you make the 150 feet regulation put in place and it has to be manned, we're gonna have many less drop boxes. You say, well, why is that? Well, a violation of this new law and the supervisor of elections office can be fined $25,000. Now, if that's not a deterrent, I don't know what is. And so they're making it harder for people to vote. They're making it harder for people to vote. They're making it harder for people to vote. Well, we'll see if DeSantis runs again in 2022. There are talks that he is in the national polls of being in the presidential race of 2024. Well, we'll see if he runs in 2022. If he does, it'll likely, I don't know, this Democratic primary could get crazy. because Charlie Crist just announced this past week that he is going to run for governor again. And when Charlie Crist was our governor, he was a great governor. He did a lot of good things for the state and for the people in this state. Mind you, a big hot issue for us was Amendment 4, I think about 2 years ago. And we did that so that people who were returning citizens can get their right to vote back. Well, when Charlie was our governor, that was like a pretty much an automated process. And over 150,000 people in the 4 years that man was governor got their rights back. That's the role that a governor can have and the power that a governor can have. And so he would be somebody who knows the mechanisms, who's already rode the bike before, who could get in and bring instantaneous relief to those of us who feel so imprisoned by this Republican way of doing politics here in the state. But Nikki Fried, our current commissioner of agriculture, the only Democrat elected in one of those top positions in the state, is thinking about challenging the governor, thinking about throwing her hat in the race. There have been talks that U.S. Congresswoman Val Demings may throw her hat in the race. And so we may be looking at a Democratic primary that's going to be a showdown, man. It's going to be more interesting in 2018 because I think we'll have a pool of extremely qualified individuals. So that's something to look for there. And then lastly here, as we wrap up this political hour, local news. Here we are in the beautiful city of St. Petersburg. I wasn't on last Friday, but if I was, I would have talked about the conversations that were led by the NAACP. It was awesome. The NAACP had what the president called clothesline conversations, right? Big old circle, middle of the street. Any and everybody welcome to come up and participate in the conversation. And they had one for 6 nights straight in every hood in our city, talking about the state of the black community, the solutions to what it is that we can identify as an issue. And it was diverse. Every community came out and showed representation. Each night the conversation kind of took a different branch. And it, for me, as somebody who is ultimately concerned with the black plight, it showed me how complex our plight is, how the stakeholders, and their different ideas about how to solve these problems, how it's beautiful to think about for me, but it is just not black and white. It's not as simple as programs. It's not as simple as jobs. It's not as simple as early childhood education. You listen to these folks. So I hope they'll do something like that again. And if they do, I'll let y'all know, and y'all need to come to that because that is black politics at its finest. The community benefits agreement policy is still got folks trying to fight for that. Mind you, especially the natives, St. Pete is changing. It's changing every day, and we see it. And somebody's getting rich every new building that comes up, every new development, everything that's under construction, even the stuff that's under construction. Somebody is making money. So we seeing all of this money being made right under our nose, but how many of us are direct recipients of the development profits? Don't build the place and then tell me I can benefit by working there, right? Or that I can save money by living there. How are we the direct recipients of any of this development that's taking place? Good question. Well, how can we ensure that we're not left out? The community benefits agreement policy. It puts into place that our community must be included in XYZ ways for development in the city. It's fair, it's equitable, but there's pushback from the city council. So pay attention to that. That's very important. We have elections coming up. A new mayor will sit in City Hall by the end of this year, and who knows, Council 2, 4, 6, and 8 are on the ballot. Those districts are on the ballot, and so who knows the way that our city council is going to lean towards the end of the year, right? Community benefits agreement can pass like that with the right election and with the right people, or it can just get pushed off to Never Land with the wrong people. So we'll keep talking about that. The deadlines for qualifying are approaching for these elections. I'm trying not to get too bogged down on who to support and what people's positions and platforms are, because anybody can hop in the race still. Anybody can hop in these races still. And so that's that. I think I've talked very thoroughly about these things in the past, and we will continue to vet them as we go in the future. But as I leave you this week, y'all, figure something out to look up that you hadn't looked up before locally. Go to Politico or NPR and just browse and read the headlines and try and familiarize. Go to Florida Politics and just read the headlines in the very least, like you're scrolling your social media. Just try and familiarize yourself with some of what's happening at the national level, at the state level, at the local level. Run your thoughts against that. What's your political identity? I'm Mhariel Summers. This is the Political Hour. I'll be back next Friday. Power Plug Radio. Thanks for watching.